Today, the committee will receive testimony from General Glen VanHerck, Commander, United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and from Admiral Craig Fowler, Commander, U.S. Southern Command. General VanHerck is appearing for his first posture hearing in his current command, and Admiral Fowler is returning to testify as Southcom Commander, and this could be your last hearing before the committee. Admiral, thank you for your dedicated service to the nation and the Navy. We appreciate it very, very much. I want to thank both of you, indeed, for your decades of service, and also, obviously, thank your families for the sacrifices that they've made to support you. And on behalf of the committee, I would also want you to thank the men and women of your commands for the selfless dedication and service to the nation. The security environment we face today is fundamentally different than even a decade ago. Near-peer competitors, China and Russia, have significantly narrowed the technological advantages that the U.S. military previously enjoyed, and they threaten to contest our military operations across all domains, including land, sea, air, cyberspace, and space. The 2018 National Defense Strategy shifted our defense priorities to focus foremost on strategic competition with China and Russia. But we need to better define what our objectives are for outcompeting our adversaries in this geopolitical rivalry. General VanHerck, you are responsible for protecting the homeland, and over the last year, that mission has centered on the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the request of FEMA, Northcom has deployed more than 2,200 personnel as part of 25 vaccination support teams at 17 sites in 9 states, administering more than 50,000 doses daily. I understand that FEMA has discussed with you ramping up to 100 vaccination support teams with the capacity to vaccinate over 400,000 people per day. This is in addition to the more than 30,000 National Guard members supporting civil authorities across 46 states and 3 territories. General VanHerck, I hope you will share your views on the challenges in scaling up this effort and any lessons learned regarding what we need long-term for addressing future pandemic threats to our nation's health security. Northcom is also tasked with operating our Homeland Ballistic Missile Defense, the ground-based mid-course defense system, to protect the United States against an intercontinental ballistic missile attack from rogue states. The threat from North Korea has only grown in recent years, and I would be interested in hearing your assessment of what additional steps can be taken to better integrate our domain awareness and modernize our missile defense systems, including plans for the next generation interceptor and the so-called underlayer missile defense protection for the homeland. Northcom is designated as the advocate for capabilities in the Arctic and plays a leading role in bringing together the combatant commands that share responsibilities for this increasingly critical region. As Russia and China become more assertive in the Arctic, it is essential that we develop a unified response across combatant commands and across the interagency, as well as in coordination with our allies and partners. General, I would appreciate any updates you could provide on this critical region. The situation along our southern border has implications for both Northcom and Southcom. Despite President Biden's termination of the declaration of a national emergency along the border and ending of the diversion of funds for the border wall, roughly 3,600 military personnel remain deployed in the region in support of the Customs and Border Patrol. This raises questions about what the Defense Department's role should be in a whole-of-government response to the situation at the southern border. In addition, recent weeks have seen an increase in the number of unaccompanied children arriving at the southern border, seeking to escape instability and violence in their home countries. While these children need to be cared for in a humane and safe manner on a case-by-case basis, I also believe we need to address the migration problem at its source, including the conditions causing adults and children to seek asylum at our border. Admiral Fowler, I would be interested in your thoughts on how the department can use security cooperation strategically to build partner capabilities and institutional capacities to counter the drivers of instability in Central America. Southcom's traditional mission has focused on countering the scourge of narcotics and the threat from transnational criminal organizations. The growing influence of China and Russia, however, threatens to further destabilize the region as these geopolitical rivals take advantage of corrupt governance in the region to advance their own strategic interests. China's malign financial influence and Russia's disinformation, amplified on Russian-controlled Spanish-language media outlets, threaten to undermine democratic governments. And in Venezuela, the Maduro regime, propped up with external support from Russia, China, and others, has caused millions of Venezuelans to flee into neighboring countries, with Colombia bearing the brunt of this exodus. Admiral Fowler, I'm interested in your assessment of the threat from near-peer competitors in the Southcom area and how we might work strategically with partners in the region to build resilience to China and Russia's malign activities. I want to thank you again for being here this morning, and I look forward to your testimony. And I also just want to note for my colleagues that there will be an informal classified briefing by Admiral Fowler in SVC 217 immediately following the session until 12:30, when we must cease. And the subject will be the increasing Chinese influence in the Southcom area. With that, let me recognize Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling this important hearing. And also thank our two witnesses, Northcom and Southcom. As you know, my top priority remains ensuring the effectiveness and implementation of the National Defense Strategy. We've all agreed this is our roadmap. This is what we're supposed to be doing. It's true today as it was 2 years ago, which identifies competition with China and Russia as the central challenge to the United States' prosperity and security. However, the growing influence of China and Russia isn't limited to Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Most people think about that. They talk about the South China Seas and other places where there are problems. Both countries have shown their way that they view the Western Hemisphere as critical terrain for fulfilling their global ambitions and challenging the United States. Admiral Fowler, China and Russia are expanding their access and influence in your AOR through increasing arms deals, military deployments, and economic and diplomatic coercion. At the same time, much of the drugs poisoning American cities are coming from Latin America through the vast illicit networks operating by multi-billion-dollar criminal organizations. General VanHerck, you have operational responsibility for defense of the United States homeland. We're facing a lot of challenges from the growing Chinese and Russian missile capabilities, including advanced cruise missiles and hypersonic missiles. And I hope you will discuss any emerging gaps you foresee in our homeland defense and offer your recommendations for addressing these challenges. Specifically, I'm interested in your views on whether waiting another decade for a new ground-based interceptor makes any sense, or if we need to act sooner given the growing threat from our adversaries. Meanwhile, we're seeing a new crisis brewing in the southwest border. According to the New York Times, approximately 78,000 immigrants tried to cross the border in January. That's double the number that were there from the year before. So we know that's happening. We know that's increasing. We don't have the numbers yet of the, I tried to get them this morning of February. We don't have those numbers yet, but we will get them. And we see that this thing is getting worse. I've always said border security is national security, and my visit to the border in August of 19 confirmed this belief. These new statistics are alarming, so I hope that you'll address whether Northcom's border support mission is sufficient and what we can do to better ensure our laws are enforced. And, you know, we talk around this thing. Nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to admit it. We've got a new president now, and the new president has a different mission. You know, he wants everyone to love him, and I understand that. But you know, I've got a picture here. I want to be made part of the record. This is all these people coming across illegally wearing their Biden T-shirts. Now, this is going on, you guys. Don't act like it's not. So anyway, we need to face this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. And now let me recognize Admiral Fowler for his testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm honored to be here with my friend and shipmate, General Glen VanHerck of United States Northern Command. Now more than ever, I feel a sense of urgency about the global threats we face here in our neighborhood, this region of our home. This neighborhood is our home. It's a shared neighborhood. It's a hemisphere which is of vital national interest to the United States. Two of the most significant threats we face are China and transnational criminal organizations. The Chinese Communist Party, with its insidious and corrupt influence, seeks regional and global economic dominance and its own version of a rules-based international order. Our strategic competition with China is global, not just in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea. China is quickly growing its influence here in our hemisphere, working on over 40 port deals, dishing out significant loans for political and economic influence, pushing for IT structure, and engaging in predatory practices like illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. We have seen many of these tactics in Asia and Africa, and we can't let them prevail here in our neighborhood. Transnational criminal organizations pose a direct threat to our national security. They traffic in arms, humans, drugs, and they claim tens of thousands of lives in America every year. These murderous tactics have resulted in 43 of the 50 most violent cities in the world being here in this hemisphere. And they drive illegal migration, and they allow bad actors like China to gain influence. COVID-19 has hit this hemisphere hard. According to the IMF, the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean shrunk 7.4% in 2020. The impacts of the pandemic, like a perfect storm, will alter the hemisphere for years to come. In the midst of all this, two back-to-back hurricanes devastated Central America, causing even greater instability. The pandemic and these unprecedented storms struck on top of this already vicious circle of threats, creating strong push factors for people in the region seeking a better life, seeking security, to come with their families to the United States. Despite an economy in tailspin, more than 5 million refugees have fled Venezuela and the illegitimate Maduro regime. Maduro continues to cling to power with the support of Cuba, Russia, Iran, and China. We can't face such daunting challenges alone. The only way to counter these influences, these threats, is to strengthen partnerships. That's how we'll win the strategic competition. I've been impressed with nations who have worked shoulder to shoulder with us despite the pandemic to counter threats. Nations like Colombia, whose professional forces have stepped up in the midst of a pandemic to conduct counter-transnational criminal organizations with dozens of other nations. And nations like Brazil, who sent their airborne company to our high-end training with the United States Army in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Good neighbors are here when you need help. And that's what the United States did in Southcom when COVID hit. We stepped up with our humanitarian assistance program, contributing over 450 projects in 28 countries. Overall, the United States is the leader in humanitarian assistance in COVID in Latin America and the Caribbean. Southcom works every day to build readiness with our trusted military and security partners. We do this through security cooperation. This includes institutional capacity building, legal training, education, IMET, and exercises. We focus on developing professional military forces that know how to fight and use the lawful use of military force. We focus on human rights training, women, peace, and security programs, and NCO development. Modest investments in these programs and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance and our presence, our posture, go a long way in this hemisphere and will help our partners counter these global threats. Finally, our success would not be possible without the men and women of our Southcom team. We're taking proactive steps to protect them from unacceptable behaviors like sexual assault and harassment, racism, and extremism. We take these threats seriously. They're a cancer to our readiness, and it's the right thing to do. Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Inhofe, on behalf of the Southcom team, thank you for the trust you place in us, and I look forward to our discussion and questions today.
Thank you, Admiral. General VanHerck, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and the distinguished members of the committee. It's a privilege to testify with you here today. I'm honored to serve as the Commander of United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command, and I'm grateful to appear alongside Admiral Fowler, as Southcom is a crucial partner in Homeland Defense. U.S. Northcom and NORAD are separate commands charged with the critical mission of defending the United States and North America, respectively. U.S. Northcom is the U.S. Geographic Combatant Command responsible for the defense of the Homeland, defense of civil authorities, defense support of civil authorities, and theater security cooperation for Canada, the Bahamas, and Mexico. NORAD is the binational command that provides aerospace warning, airspace control, and maritime warning for the United States and Canada. U.S. Northcom and NORAD service members and civilians are executing the Secretary of Defense's top priority by standing watch to defend our nation against all threats, whether posed by competitors, natural disasters, or a pandemic. Over the last year, NORAD fighters, tankers, and airborne early warning aircraft responded to multiple incursions into our air defense identification zones. Multiple ships sortied under U.S. Northcom operational control to defend our maritime approaches, and U.S. Northcom synchronized the Department of Defense's support to lead federal agencies as thousands of service members deployed within the U.S. Northcom area of responsibility to aid states and local communities in the fight against coronavirus. Today, thousands of service members are providing life-saving vaccinations to our citizens. No matter the threat, we are always ready to defend the lives of our citizens and our homelands. Right now, as we confront the scourge of this pandemic, the threats we face and the pace of change in the geostrategic environment continue to advance. We have entered an era of renewed global competition, and this time we're facing two peer competitors, both nuclear armed. We must adapt to the challenges posed by this reality. Since the first Gulf War, the United States military has focused on projecting power forward to confront rogue regimes, violent extremist organizations, and other potential adversaries who threatened American interest. We trusted in our nuclear deterrent and an assured power projection capability, as well as the blessings of geography to prevent an attack on our soil. In parallel, our competitors expanded the definition of competition into economic and informational areas and have aggressively advanced their own military capabilities to hold our homelands at risk, both kinetically and non-kinetically. Those efforts were predominantly focused on long-range strike, improved delivery platforms, cyber capabilities intended to circumvent our defenses from all directions and in all domains, and exploiting a perceived gap between our foundational nuclear deterrent and our conventional homeland defense deterrent capabilities. Concurrently, the rise of transnational criminal organizations and the subsequent strains on governance and the instability they create has created additional opportunities for our competitors that they are working to exploit today. We must outpace our competitors by accelerating our own efforts to transform our culture, investing in our people to grow both talent within the ranks and counter extremist and destructive behaviors, anti-ethical to our values. We must invest early and often in relationships with allies and partners to develop a global team of like-minded nations. And we must factor homeland defense into every strategy, plan, force management, force design, as well as all aspects of acquisitions and budget so we can deter in competition, de-escalate in crisis, and defeat in conflict. To do this, both U.S. Northcom and NORAD are concentrated efforts on building our capability to deter and, if needed, defend against increasingly advanced all-domain threats. Together with the Canadian Armed Forces, we are in the early stages of NORAD modernization and building additional military capabilities in the Arctic. In coordination with the Missile Defense Agency, United States Strategic Command, United States Space Comm, we're maintaining and improving our ballistic missile defense capability. In order to balance our readiness for crisis and conflict while also staying in global competition, we are placing significant emphasis on left-of-launch framework. This framework will increase decision space, uncovering more deterrence and de-escalation options vice in-game defeat. We're advocating for investment in all-domain awareness to generate a layered sensing grid and a layered defense approach that emphasizes the use of an open sensor data architecture and machine-enhanced processing in order to achieve information dominance and decision superiority. Through information dominance, we will grant decision makers increased decision space and build flexible response options to deter, deny, and defeat every threat to the United States and Canada. I'm grateful for the trust that you place in United States Northern Command and NORAD, and both commands take solemn pride in our responsibility to defend our homelands. We will forever have the watch. Thank you for your support and time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you very much, General. And before we begin, I want to remind my colleagues of the procedures. Since it is impossible to know exactly when our colleagues who will be joining via the computer arrive, we will not be following our standard early bird timing rule. Instead, we will handle the order of questions by seniority, alternating sides until we've gone through everyone. Once we reach the end, if there is anyone we missed, we will start back at the top of the list and continue until everyone has had their turn. We will do the standard 5-minute rounds, and I ask my colleagues on the computers and at their desks to please keep an eye on the clock, which you should see on your screens or right before you. Finally, to allow for everyone to be heard, whether in the room or on the computer, I ask all colleagues to please mute your microphone when not speaking. Thank you. Admiral Fowler, again, thank you for your distinguished service over many years. And the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, is a particular unstable region, and many of those who are seeking relief and moving towards our border are coming from this area. Security and human rights have deteriorated there significantly, increased violence by criminal organizations and narcotics distributors, and we can continue to provide security clearance to these countries, security assistance rather, yet corruption remains rampant and international efforts to build capabilities are not effective. In Honduras in particular, the corruption appears to reach the highest level of the government. The criminal trial in the Southern District of New York of the Honduran president's brother unearthed evidence of the Honduran president and other senior officials taking millions of dollars in bribes from drug traffickers. Honduran security forces are also documented as having engaged in gross human rights violations for years. Given all of this, Admiral, do we need to reconsider whether our approach to security assistance in the Northern Triangle countries is achieving our national objectives?
The perfect storm of conditions that you outlined, Senator, the violence, the impact of the pandemic, the impact of the hurricanes has created untenable security for the citizens, and that's why we're seeing this flood of migrants to our borders. Our focus at Southcom should and remains in support of U.S. government hold efforts, our diplomats in our embassies, and that security cooperation is a long-term investment on the professional militaries. So institution capacity building, we have a long-standing human rights training program that has been effective in developing forces that know how to use force in a professional manner. Our Women's Peace and Security program has proven to be a game changer. Those nations want to model and emulate our success. Our NCO development, our IMET, there is an appropriate place moving forward, Senator, for our long-term engagement with our partners. They model their professionalism after us, and I can trust elements of the Honduran and Guatemalan forces. We vet them. We work with our interagency.
It seems in those areas and other areas around the world, we've invested a great deal in the military. We've developed effective military forces, but so much of this is a law enforcement issue and a judicial issue. And we don't seem, and again, this is outside your lane, but a whole government approach would seem to me more of an investment in training police, in providing judicial remedies that are actual, not fictitious. Is that your view also? We need more help to our other agencies?
One of the successes I've seen is watching our other agencies actually engage in judicial training programs and moving that forward. One of our own programs is the Defense Legal Security Cooperation Program, the DILS program out of Newport, Rhode Island, where we work with partners on how they can develop an effective judicial system. I think these programs are effective, Senator. It takes time to see the results of that effectiveness, But in the past year, when there was a lot of opportunity for our partner militaries to commit human rights violations because they were deeply involved in helping with internal security, they stayed on the field in a professional manner. And they did model their professional behavior after the training that we've been able to provide.
Thank you. General VanHerck, I'm sorry, I have but a few minutes, but could you give us quickly sort of your takeaways from the COVID virus situation? What fundamental changes we might have to make?
Chairman, absolutely. COVID has given us great opportunity to reflect and learn on our planning as we were ready. What we've done is continue to adapt. What we have found is that the support functions, the emergency support function process through the interagency is crucial, working with local and state authorities to ensure that we're synced up to provide that response. We work closely with DHS. We work closely with HHS, Public Health Services, to ensure we're ready. In addition to that, we're going back and changing and updating our global pandemic and infectious disease plan to ensure that we're ready and have adapted the lessons learned, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, General. Thank you both for your service. Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's a crisis on the border. I think we all know that. It's the number of migrants trying to cross more than doubled in January 2021 from a year prior to that. And the number of migrant children in custody has tripled. Now, we've come a full circle. We don't like to talk about it. We had weak enforcement of our immigration laws under the President Obama, to strong enforcement under President Trump. And now the expectation of a weak enforcement under President Biden is driving a surge of illegal migrants. And that's where I have this picture here. This is they're all coming across the border. You know, they're coming fast, and they're all wearing Biden t-shirts. So we got a problem down there. And I just have to ask the question, Admiral Fowler, do you agree that a strong enforcement of the immigration laws serves as a deterrent against illegal migration?
Senator, all nations deserve secure borders, and our focus has been on that heinous insecurity in Central America caused by transnational criminal organizations that have no respect for the rule of law, rain violence on their population. They market in drugs and people and guns and illegal mining, and one of the prime sources that underwrites their efforts is Chinese money laundering. So our focus has been on the source, working with our partner nations.
But just a specific question, do you agree that strong enforcement of immigration laws serves as a deterrent against illegal migration?
The number one deterrent that I hear of when I to all our partner nations is the United States judicial system. I agree, Senator.
Okay, and do you agree with that also, General? Simple question.
Chairman, as previously stated, border security is national security. And I agree that we must consider our laws that are in place. What we're doing right now is we are supporting the lead federal agency from NORTHCOM, which is Homeland Security, that allows them to enforce the laws that are in book. We're providing support in the form of aviation support, ground support through detection and monitoring as well.
Okay, but you do agree then? Strong enforcement of those laws. You can have all the laws on the books you want, but if you don't enforce the laws, it's not going to work. You agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Very good. And Admiral Fowler, I'm a little concerned about something that, in terms of resources down there. In your opening statement, I think, or it was in the written statement, I guess it was, you said that you only receive less than 1% of all DOD ISR. Only 1% of all DOD ISR, is that right?
Senator, intelligence drives everything. That allows us to have the domain awareness that General VanHerck spoke about, so we can then inform our other interagency partners of what the threats are up to. And we have less than 1% of the ISR.
You know, I read that some time ago, and we had a visit. I tried to figure out how that could be. Maybe I'm missing something here. that less than 1% of ISR comes into that area. And I don't understand. So that's not adequate, right?
Senator, we're short in ISR, in intelligent assets, and security cooperation. And we have, in general, our posture is thin. And we've got to be on the field to compete, Senator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. You know, I know the border. I was back in the days I was enjoying life. I can remember I was a builder and developer down there. People on the East Coast don't understand this, but there's an island down there called South Padre Island. It's actually now don't leave because you need to hear this. That it's that island down there is 140 miles long and 1 block wide. And I was a builder and developer down there. I know the border, and I know them down there, and they talk about the tough border security and what is necessary. So I just want you to know I'm familiar with that down there, and I think it's doing a disservice not to talk about it. We need to enforce the border, and I do want to have this picture made a part of the record at this point. So with that, I'll yield the floor.
Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of you for your service and for being here this morning. Admiral Fowler, I want to start with you because I find the maps that you've given us and the statistics on these alarming, to say the least. On the map that shows Chinese influence, if you were going to give us a map that said United States influence, how many, for example, countries could we cite that are hosting American infrastructure projects? And how many countries are enjoying training and military support or other economic support from the United States? And how many heads of state meetings could we cite since 2015?
Senator, our influence is eroding, and that margin is shrinking. And we'd be best able to show that with arrows that have downward trends. And it's important that we remain engaged in this hemisphere. It's our neighborhood. That proximity matters. And as you pointed out, the Chinese see that. We hosted a conference last week at Southcom with our allies, UK, Canada, France, Netherlands, who have significant interest in ensuring a stable, secure neighborhood. And one of the foreign participants said that the region is in a lifeboat, and it is sinking in the violence, and it is sinking in Chinese influence. What I hear from my partners is, we hear you, Admiral Fowler. We know that the United States military is the best. We want to partner with you, but when you're drowning, you need a life ring. You're going to take the life ring from whoever throws it.
That is disappointing. I appreciate what you're saying, and that was my reason for the question, because it's very clear that we are not keeping up in the way that we should in terms of influence and support in Latin America. Can I ask, when you talk about Senator Inhofe raised the 1% of resources that you have for Southcom, and one of the operations that you're responsible for is counter-narcotics operations. In New Hampshire, we have been dramatically impacted by the opioid epidemic, and obviously drugs coming in across our southern border come up Interstate 95 all the way to New Hampshire and northern New England. How much, if you were going to define what percentage of your operations are counter-narcotics, can you describe that? And can you use, if you had more resources, would you be able to address more of what's happening with the transnational criminal organizations?
Senator, I'd like to start by thanking the New Hampshire National Guard, our state partner for El Salvador, a critical partner, and the National Guard across our region. That's our #1 force provider. They've stayed engaged despite the pandemic in a way that builds trust and partners and helps train them. What our real goal here is to train our partner nations to take care of their own security problems. We can't interdict our way out of the narcotics problem. We've got to get our partners in the game. And this past year, despite a pandemic, they actually increased their performance, their involvement, up to 60% of all our disruptions. But that's still not enough. We've got to focus on the source and the destination. And one of the key areas that needs more emphasis, and we've really worked hard this past year with our partners is in countering the money supply. I talked about the importance of that, really getting to break the back of these organizations. And I would note that in that regard, the DEA has cited Chinese money laundering as the #1 underwriter of transnational criminal organizations. So it's got to be a whole government effort, and we've got to work to build our partners' capacity.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your nice comments about the New Hampshire National Guard. I agree, they have had an excellent partnership with El Salvador. General VanHerck, I only have a little bit of time left, but I wanted to ask you about the impact that you're seeing from climate change on the Arctic, which we know is melting a lot of the ice there and opening up routes through the Arctic. What impact is that having on our potential impact is that having on our national security, and what do we need to do to respond?
Senator, environmental change is having a significant impact as it creates opportunities and it also creates vulnerabilities. The question is, are we postured to seize on opportunities and to defend against potential competition and vulnerabilities? It creates access to resources. 25% of Russia's GDP is dependent upon resources in the Arctic, and both Russia and China are trying to establish new norms and rules of behavior for international law. I understand time is out here. I'd love to talk more to you about this subject.
I would love to hear that, and I would bet if we join the Law of the Sea Treaty, we might be able to better address some of the influences that China and Russia are doing. You don't need to respond to that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator Wicker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Fuller, could you supplement on behalf of Senator Shaheen and me the three charts that she mentioned? They say Chinese influence, Russian influence, and Iranian influence. Can you get back on the record and just do one that says U.S. influence?
The U.S. remains the partner.
No, no. Will you supplement on the record a chart? I'm asking you to do that.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, very good. Let me ask you then, Admiral, about the involvement of the Coast Guard in what you do. I'm also on the Commerce Committee where we have oversight there, and I've grown concerned that the Coast Guard is not sufficiently resourced to conduct its own missions, much less support what seems to be a growing demand for having Coast Guard units supporting DOD missions to Southcom and other AORs. Do I have correct information there? How much do you rely on the Coast Guard, not just to counter drug and illegal fishing missions, but also for theater engagement with us and our allies?
The Coast Guard is a tremendous asset for us, and they are on the field in a meaningful way. They are a top priority for all our partners, building capacity and countering the threats. Despite the pandemic, the national security cutters, the fast response cutters, these are well-manned, well-trained ships making a difference day in, day out, including their aircraft. We couldn't do our mission without the United States Coast Guard. They are a principal source to counter threats in this hemisphere.
Do we have enough ships to meet your theater requirements for
We
the
do
Coast Guard?
not. We do not have sufficient Coast Guard ships or Navy ships to meet the requirements. We need additional assets and planes.
Okay. And General VanHerck, let's transition then to Northcom. And once again, I have the same interest as Senator Shaheen about the Arctic. I was pleased that the previous administration released an updated strategy for the Arctic, and I'm afraid that we lag behind our peers, particularly Russia. Is that correct? And this year, the Coast Guard begins construction of the first of a new class of icebreakers, the Polar Security Cutter. 6 total ships have been authorized, a vast improvement over the 2 aging ships we have, but a far cry from Russia's fleet of 40. Can you explain why icebreaking capability is so critical, and do you believe it's important to advocate for a larger fleet of Coast Guard cutters and icebreakers?
Senator, yes, thank you. And I agree with your assessment. We are lagging behind. Why it's so important is you have to be on the field to play. It's about persistence. Not only do we need to have access through persistence to break ice to ensure that we can have Coast Guard cutters or potentially Navy destroyers or cruisers in the area, we have to have communications as well for persistence. I'm thankful to the committee for $46 million that got us started with polar communications. North of 65 latitude, it's really tough to communicate. That'll get us an initial start. But I also have a require for fuel north of Dutch Harbor, Alaska, which will also contribute to the persistence of competing in the Arctic. This is about persistence. We're in competition, as I said in my opening statement, and to be competitive with Russia and China, specifically in the Arctic, you have to be part of the, on the field, if you will. And so it's crucial that we do that and continue producing capabilities that will allow us to be in the Arctic.
So fuel capabilities and communications capabilities are not where they ought to be. Last year, the Navy was investigating the possibility of establishing a new base in the Arctic. Have you been involved in any discussions with the Navy regarding establishing a permanent base in the Arctic? And how could a Navy base improve your ability to execute U.S. Arctic strategy?
Senator, to answer your question directly, I have not been involved in any discussions with the Navy. I'm aware of the study that was done for a potential port, specifically with regards to Nome, Alaska, which will get after the requirement for fuel north of Dutch Harbor. That report was completed by the Army Corps of Engineers and submitted for congressional awareness.
Would this be helpful? Yes. Do you have an opinion?
It would be helpful to meet my requirement to have fuel for that persistence to compete with nations that are interested in the Arctic.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Now via WebEx, Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Fowler, as you noted in your written testimony, Russia has eagerly flooded online communities in Latin America with disinformation intended to undermine faith in democratic institutions and in the United States. Separately, China is investing heavily in information technology that can be easily manipulated by the Chinese government at their discretion for espionage or cyber intrusions. Do you feel that Southcom is adequately equipped to do its part to handle the separate but overlapping risks posed by these efforts?
Recently, in a visit to one of our partner countries, I had the leader of that country lean over and said, how do I get rid of the Chinese information technology that was sold to get after the violence in the city, but then oddly appears outside the U.S. Embassy and other places which are in the most secure parts of the city? These efforts have got to require a whole of government, whole of world approach where we offer safe technology and safe, affordable solutions moving forward. For our part, we've really participated with U.S. Special Operations Command in standing up appropriate information capabilities to counter in the information space. And I think that effort is nascent. It's having some effect, but it's very small scale given the volume. Just in Russia alone, they had over 17 million disinformation hits last year in social media. Outside Russian language, their Spanish language social media is their biggest effort, and they increased it threefold last year, particularly trying to discredit everything the United States did to help our partners recover from the pandemic.
Admiral, as you pointed out earlier, while China's economic coercion practices are only one element of its strategy to exert influence in the region, it is certainly an important one. Is there a way for Southcom and other U.S. entities to facilitate opportunities for economic engagement, where we can highlight the benefits of working with the U.S. as opposed to China?
There's some great efforts that Congress has championed, the Developmental Finance Corps and others in support of that. I think it's incumbent on all professionals like myself to learn as much about the economic elements as power as possible, but then to focus on what we do best, which is working with our partner militaries, supplying them professional training, professional education, and exercise program They want to partner with us. That's their North Star. And we've got to have the right security conditions so that we can have sustainable economics. Businesses are fearful when they can't invest in a safe environment.
Understood. General VanHerck, as the Admiral noted, it's clear that one of our biggest challenges in the Western Hemisphere will be China's technological engagement that threatens our security. Are we beginning to see any signs that China's growing technological presence in the Southcom region is forcing Northcom to rethink its strategy of how it defends its domain, given the close proximity between the two regions?
Senator, we look closely at China's influence. They are absolutely in the Northcom AOR attempting to influence in the Bahamas, working through 5G, for example. The same thing in Mexico. We continue to defend all domains. Northcom defends our critical cyber infrastructure with allocated cyber protection teams, and we work closely with Cybercom and NSA as well. We're the DISCA synchronizer for cyber. If there is a need to provide defense support of civil authorities, we continually work with civil authorities as well to assess the needs for Homeland Security, as well as other agencies across the government.
Thank you. In your written statement, you indicated Russia and China had developed hypersonic and nuclear warhead-tipped cruise missiles. North Korea is also advancing its intercontinental ballistic missile program. These weapons put our allies and our own national security at risk. The current missile defense is based at the ground-based interceptor, or GBI, which was fielded 16 years ago. Since that time, we've improved the system and grown the size of the available arsenal. Last year, we appropriated money for the next generation interceptor, the NGI system, to improve our defenses. While I'm clear-eyed about the threat posed by enemy states' missiles, it is currently a time of competing priorities, particularly in light of COVID. In your opinion, can we still rely on the GBI for the foreseeable future? And two, assuming we need to push back on the NGI system, how long can we rely on the current arsenal?
Senator, I'm comfortable with my ability to defend the homeland, including Hawaii, against a limited state actor such as DPRK, which the system's designed for the foreseeable future. The key thing is to maintain the timeline of no later than 2028 for NGI to ensure that we maintain capacity and capability to defend against the ballistic missile threat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Now, via WebEx, Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General VanHerck, I appreciated our discussion last week, and I'd like to revisit our conversation on the NGI. Senator Gillibrand was just touching on some points of that as well. When you talk about the threat that we are facing and the advancing threat that we're seeing, do you believe that the additional capabilities that NGI will provide the warfighter over our current interceptor fleet are absolutely necessary?
Senator, I do. It gives us extra capacity to go against threats that are developed that could exceed our current GBI inventory. In addition to that, it will give us capability because the threat continues to advance their capabilities, such as decoys and diversion with the capability. So the NGI is crucial to give us that capability. It also provides us a foundation for our deterrence. It provides deterrence by denial. The nuclear deterrent is the foundation, but the NGI and the GBI give us deterrence by denial, Senator.
Thank you, sir. Also, you and I discussed the increasingly capable cruise missile arsenals that adversaries possess and the very real threat they pose to the homeland. In your opening statement, you talk a lot about the concept of that domain awareness. Can you talk about what that means for you, how it relates to the threats that are posed, say, by cruise missiles?
Senator, yes, thank you for the opportunity. Cruise missiles challenge our legacy warning system significantly. They've generated very long-range capabilities. They can actually shoot cruise missiles, they being Russia, today from over their homeland, which will challenge our legacy systems. We don't want to be in a situation, we my personal opinion, where in-game defeat is our only option. We need to get further left, and that starts with domain awareness. Left of the archer, if you will, before they take off, whether that be in a submarine, whether that be in a sea vessel, or whether that be in a bomber, to have decision space for our senior leaders. Decision space starts with that domain awareness. Once you take that domain awareness, whether that be from undersea to space to cyberspace and everything in between, and you use machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities, what I call information dominance, now we're able to get further left and give our decision makers deterrence capabilities beyond the foundation of our which is our nuclear deterrence, and an in-game kinetic attack, which would require a response. Very escalatory in either one, Senator.
You know, you're using all sorts of technologies now that you're applying on your demonstrations that Northcom's conducted in this area. Do you have other examples you can share with us?
Absolutely, Senator. So we have a program called Pathfinder that we've moved out on over the last year that takes information, data. I'm a believer that the future of competition, crisis, and conflict, he or she with the data and the information will win. What we've taken is an example. So you'll remember in 2015, when the gyrocopter actually flew down from north here in the National Capital Region and landed on the Capitol lawn. That situation, none of the sensors in the area, whether they be the NORAD sensors that we have or other sensors alone, detected that target. But when we took the Pathfinder capability and we analyzed the information, we took information that was left on the cutting room floor that was not previously analyzed. There that gyrocopter was. That's what I'm talking about. Information today that exists in stovepipes in government agencies, even within the Department of Defense, that's not shared more broadly. We have to take advantage of data and information going forward, Senator.
Thank you, General. Admiral Fowler, Nebraska's RC-135s are frequent guests in your part of the world, and we know that the Air Force is doing what it can, but there are shortfalls. Last year, you told the committee you only have 20% of the ISR that you need, and the bulk of that amount comes from Customs and Border Protection assets. As a commander, you've said that only 8% of Southcom's overall ISR need is met by military assets. Is that still the case?
Senator, compounding that 8% figure, we received a 46% cut to our ISR-related budget this year in year. So that will significantly challenge our ability to understand the threats of all types in the hemisphere. Intelligence drives everything.
Yeah, so what gets left on the table as a result of your inability to get that ISR coverage?
A significant amount of movement of transnational criminal organizations, our understanding of what our competitors are up to, Russia, China, Iran. A lot gets left on the table that is contributing to this violence that's driving instability here in the United States and in our partner nations.
And we see their presence growing in your combatant command areas. So I understand the need for that. Thank you, Admiral. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Blumenthal, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service and for being here today. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit the Caribbean and South America very hard. I am concerned that we need to continue to stay vigilant against attempts by Russia and most especially China to exploit the suffering of our neighbors to the south to increase their influence in the region. Admiral Fowler, in your posture statement, you stated that China and Russia are using the COVID-19 pandemic to gain greater influence in South America. Can you explain how that is occurring, and what would you recommend the United States do to maintain American influence in the region in the face of that public health threat during that time?
The conditions that the pandemic has caused in Latin America and the Caribbean rival those of the Great Depression here in the United States. It will take years for the region to cover. The IMF says it has estimated it is the region with the longest recovery time. We have seen, and there was a New York Times article today on this, China particularly move in with a heavy-handed mask and vaccine diplomacy, that they are using the vaccines to leverage deals for their IT, their 5G, and they're using it to try to drive a wedge between some nations like Taiwan and others in the region. This is indicative of Chinese global coercive insidious behavior. We're seeing it play out. We need to stay on the field with a whole government effort. And once we've taken care of the United States, be first with a concerted plan to take care of our neighborhood with vaccines here.
I hear you saying that we need a much more aggressive and, frankly, humanitarian effort in this part of the world, our neighboring region, in fact, part of the Western Hemisphere family, to take care of people in our own enlightened self-interest.
Senator, to date, I've been very proud of the U.S. government effort in PPE and other COVID-related supplies. We're not taking much credit for it, but by far and away the single largest donator in this hemisphere, and in the Department of Defense, using our humanitarian assistant authorities, we moved out with small projects at speed. Over 400 projects, $54 million that have made a real impact. But the next phase is going to be in vaccines and long-term recovery, and we've got to be as aggressive and forward-leaning in that phase, I would say particularly in this hemisphere, because the proximity here matters to the security of the United States.
And it's not only a public health crisis, it's really a very deep-seated economic crisis linked to the pandemic, I hear you saying.
Senator, in October, I traveled with my civilian deputy commander, Ambassador Gene Maines, a wonderful diplomat, great civ-mil relationship in our headquarters. We went on our first multiple-day trip. We traveled to Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, Costa Rica. And the hollow look in the eyes of our partners, they're struggling to fill their gas tanks and find food for their security forces because of the stress the pandemic and the violence has placed. And this creates real opportunities for our competitors who are more than willing to step into that violent sauce and take advantage of it for their own interests.
And it has ramifications in terms of generating flows of migrants, the drug trade, all kinds of other ramifications that are destructive to our country, potentially.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Cotton, please.
Admiral Fowler, I want to speak about the legal conditions on the ground in the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Do the governments of those three countries systematically persecute their own citizens on the basis of race, ethnicity, sex, political views, religious belief, or other such categories?
Senator, when I go, I'm lockstep with our embassies, and we've got great diplomats, and we don't see a systematic exploitation. I work with the militaries, and the elements we work with are vetted and trusted, and I find they're doing the right thing, whether it's Honduras, Guatemala, or El Salvador.
Thank you. I think that's a very important point. The governments of Honduras and El Salvador and Guatemala do not persecute their own citizens systematically on the basis of race, sex, ethnicity, religion, or political views, which is the basis for asylum and refugee status under our laws. An economic migrant is not eligible for asylum. They are not eligible for refugee status. Asylum is designed for people like, say, a Hong Konger whose student visa expires and doesn't want to return to Hong Kong now that the Chinese Communist Party has cracked down on that country. The reason we have a crisis at our border is because President Biden, his administration, opened the border and ended the policies of the Trump administration that made it clear you could not make the very dangerous journey across Mexico. You could not pay smugglers and traffickers thousands of dollars to get to our southern border and then expect to be let in. If you let them in, more will come. That's why we have a crisis at the border. General VanHerck, we've been supporting the Department of Homeland Security at the border for some time now with DOD personnel. The most recent major adjustment in numbers was in 2018, is that right?
That's correct. In 2018, then this year, we're up to nearly 4,000 total numbers.
And has the status of the border changed from 2018 to March of 2021?
When you say status of the border, can you clarify?
The conditions there, and whether or not we're closer to having a secure border or we have a less secure border now than we did when this major personnel change first started.
I would defer to Homeland Security for the security of the border. We're in direct support of Homeland Security for that mission. I can tell you the numbers of migrants coming across has dramatically increased here in recent months.
And what kind of strain does that put on our personnel at the border?
Our personnel being DOD?
DOD personnel.
DOD continues to provide support to Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection, mainly in the detection and monitoring. Total number of 4,000 does not place an incredible strain on the force and has not shown significant strategic readiness of our ability to accomplish our missions.
I've seen some media reports that suggest, in addition to economic migrants who are not eligible for asylum showing up at our border from Latin America, that we are now beginning to see foreign nationals from other countries in Africa and Asia. To your knowledge, is that correct?
Senator, I'm aware of intelligence reports that corroborate exactly what you just said.
What kind of threat does it pose to our country that persons might be traveling from the old world to the new world to join these migrant flows?
I believe that we must continue to monitor anybody who has nefarious desires for our country. Homeland defense, border security is national security, which equals homeland defense. There will be people take advantage of the opportunity to come across that border.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, General VanHerck. I mean, if our border is open, anyone from around the world can get to Mexico and try to cross our border, not just to seek a better life here, but to harm or ultimately try to kill our own people. And I go back to the simple point. If you let them in, more will come. All the controversy you see in the media are misplaced, talking about how fast we're processing migrants through these detention facilities or whether they have enough showers or beds or cots. If you don't let them in the first place, you don't have to worry about the conditions in the detention centers. The Biden administration has to reverse course. There are three simple solutions. First, it should reapply the public health declaration under Title 42 to all foreign nationals, to include minors, just like the Trump administration did, as the Biden administration still does for adults. Second, it should renegotiate a new migrant protection protocol with Mexico, which it tore up for no reason on its first days in office. And third, it should re-enter a safe third country agreement with Guatemala. If you're seeking asylum at our border, there's no reason you cannot seek asylum in Guatemala. That was the lesson of the last administration. Those three things alone will solve our crisis at the border, and they can all be done tomorrow.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Admiral Fowler, I want to follow up on the comments made about the border crisis. It is a crisis, and there are important things that we must do. I want to puncture the partisan finger pointing that's been done, because it's a crisis I think that we all have to solve. The notion that this was bad under the Obama administration, fine under the Trump administration, and now bad again is just not realistic. During the Obama administration, we worked together in Congress on a comprehensive immigration reform bill that would have poured billions, tens of billions of dollars into border security. It was bipartisan in the Senate. It could go nowhere in a Republican-dominated House. Wouldn't even get a committee hearing. During the Trump administration, we came up with a plan that was bipartisan in February of 2018 that would have protected dreamers and put $25 billion into border security, every penny that the president had asked for. And when the bill was introduced with 16 co-sponsors, 8 Democrats, 8 Republicans, the Trump administration having said that they would sign the bill. You put it on my desk, I'll sign it, is what the president told many of us. They decided within a day that they so didn't like dreamers that they were willing to turn away $25 billion in border security. We missed an opportunity in 2013 to put about $40 billion into border security because of a Republican House. We missed an opportunity in 2018 to put $25 billion into border security because the president didn't like dreamers. Now, I don't say that to suggest that the problem at the border is the fault of one party or another. It is a challenge. We all have to deal with it, and we have to find solutions. And I share my colleagues' views that one of the solutions is putting some tough laws in place and enforcing them. I think the asylum rules are maybe need to be tightened up. I want to correct my colleague. He asked you a question about asylum rules and asked if there was persecution for another reason, but he left out persecution based on political status. I can assure you in the Northern Triangle, having lived there, there is significant persecution in the nations in the Northern Triangle against political dissidents, against journalists, against environmental activists. And there has been a history of persecution against indigenous people. There are some other groups that my colleague is right. They're not being persecuted directly now, but political opponents are. In Honduras, where I lived, the OAS said after the last presidential election that the election should be rerun because they were so corrupt. Instead, the U.S. recognized the corrupt government and then cut off aid to the corrupt government. And then what we see today, as you said, Admiral Fowler, is sort of a perfect storm. If we don't invest in security and economics, there will be economic refugees, and my colleague is right. An economic refugee is not entitled to asylum status. But nevertheless, if we are not working to promote security and economic improvement, there is a natural consequence to that. So we need tougher border security. We need to increase investments in security assistance in the region. We need to hold authoritarians accountable rather than turn a blind eye to their misdeeds. These are things that we can do and we can do together. General VanHerck, I want to ask you a question. Canada is a pretty good ally of the United States militarily, aren't they?
Absolutely, Senator.
In my conversations with the Canadian Foreign Minister and the Canadian Minister of Defense, it has been a sore point with them that the U.S. uses national security waivers against them to impose tariffs. We have trade disputes with Canada over milk, over lumber products, over all kinds of things. That's not unusual given the sizable border that we share. But they expressed to me a particular concern when the previous administration labels them a national security threat. And they point out, hey, we fight with you in every war. We're side by side with you in military hospitals at Landstuhl and elsewhere. Have you heard a similar concern expressed, dissatisfaction from the Canadian side about the U.S. using national security, labeling them a national security threat in order to impose tariffs?
Senator, in my discussions with the Minister of National Defense, the Deputy, and also the Chief of the Defense Staff, I have not been engaged or had that discussion.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Now via WebEx, Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, good morning. I thank you for both of your continued dedication to our country and for your previous service. Let me begin. I'd like to start with Admiral Fowler. Understanding and combating Russian and Chinese influence operations truly is critical to our national security. Senator Gillibrand began this discussion with you a little while ago, talking about what was happening in our southern regions. Admiral Fowler, I'd like to talk a little bit about what our options are, what the tools are that are available to you to counteract that misinformation, and what tools you may need right now or what additional assistance you need in order to be able to counteract some of the misinformation that currently is occurring.
I can't stress enough the full court press that China has on to gain their economic dominance in their version of a world order globally and in this hemisphere, which I look at this hemisphere as the front line of competition. And we have to approach that as such as a U.S. government across all elements of power with the diplomats and in the lead, clearly. Military plays a role. Our principal method to block Chinese military interests. The PLA is by staying engaged with our partners in our exercise program, our IMET program. These are world-class. China's tried to copy them. They've tried to replicate Leavenworth in Spanish and Portuguese. We need to remain the best at what we do and ensure we provide the volume that is needed to allow our hemisphere partners to be professional and partner with us. In the IT space, we have to stay engaged to understand what they're up to. That goes back to intelligence resources. So I would sum this up by saying additional intelligence assets, continued security cooperation, and increased volume of IMET and exercises, and then enough assets to stay on the field. That includes our small Special Operations Force teams, which are very effective. And last year, we received great support from the United States Army to put some small security force assistance teams in places like Colombia and Honduras, which are having great effect to train, and it's only training, not accompany our partners.
Thank you, General. General VanHerck, right now, you've got on a day-to-day basis, you clearly have more individuals trying to cross the border into the United States. There's no question about that. And clearly that's something which most certainly in your supporting role will take up a fair part of your day. But at the same time, you have one of the most critical responsibilities out there, defending the homeland against those possibilities of a strategic attack. Today, we have this discussion going on about the need for the triad, the continuation of our triad, and also for the need to provide specific defense protection against incoming weapon systems. Can you talk about the connectivity or the connection between having all three legs of the triad available and also needing to still have the ability to defend the homeland? And if we were to take away any one of the legs of the triad, what that would do in terms of increasing the challenge for you of defending the homeland with missile systems set up to protect against incoming weapon systems?
Sure, Senator. First, the nuclear deterrent and the triad remains the foundation of Homeland Defense. I would defer to Admiral Richard on specifics about the triad. I know that the triad today was designed for specific capabilities to basically take the calculus of any threat and create deterrence options because of the flexibility that the triad creates. The most reactive forces are ICBMs. The most flexible force is the bombers, and certainly the most survivable force is the submarines. Each of those contributes significantly to homeland defense. We haven't had a great power conflict since World War II, and the triad and the nuclear deterrent has been part of that. With that said, our competitors today are trying to circumvent the nuclear triad and have developed and stated intent to attack the homeland because they assume they can be successful to destroy our will below the nuclear threshold. I'm concerned about having the ability to give decision makers key decision space in that realm, but not all in-game defeat. And so deterrence by denial is what I talk about, and that is giving options to senior leaders to create doubt in a competitor or adversary's mind about their ability to achieve their objectives with a strike on the homeland, Senator.
Thank you. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. And now let me recognize Senator King via WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And General, I'd like to follow up on a comment made at the end of her questioning by Senator Shaheen and asking, in your professional military opinion, would it be in the interest of the United States to accede to the Law of the Sea Treaty?
Senator, yes, it would be. It gives us a better posture, a seat at the table, more credibility when we work many of the issues that we have to work around the globe with allies, partners, and potential competitors.
And that's particularly true in the Arctic, isn't it? That's where the Russians are staking claims as we speak.
Senator, I agree with your assessment. And as Russia takes over the Arctic Council in May, It's never been more crucial for us with our like-minded nations and allies and partners that we come to agreement to not allow Russia and China to exploit any seams and gaps.
Thank you. I'd like to turn for a moment to the immigration question and the crisis at the border, which everyone recognizes. Admiral Fowler, I think at the beginning of your testimony, you pointed out that there were significant, what I call push factors, as well as the change of administration, which is a pull factor, but the combination of the impact of COVID, the two major hurricanes, and the transnational gangs is making life intolerable for people in those Northern Triangle countries. Is that not also true?
Senator, I've met with folks who have walked all the way to the border and come back, and their drive was the violence, the fear for their life, their lack of food for their families, the insecurity. And in this past year, we've had that perfect storm of additional factors, COVID, and then back-to-back major hurricanes. The region is fragile. The conditions are on par with our Great Depression, and our engagement is critical to help our partner nations overcome this challenge.
It strikes me that whatever we do on border security, and I'm fully supportive of a secure border, as long as we have these three countries near our border that are in such terrible shape, people are going to continue to try to find ways to escape. I've heard the term, we need a Marshall Plan for that region in order to try to stabilize these countries in terms of their own internal security, their own economies. Does that ring any bells for you?
Senator, I think a Marshall Plan would be a wonderful model as we look at the entire hemisphere, really, and look at the sources of instability across the hemisphere. In addition to Central America, we see Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela, all sources of illegal migration to the United States. In Venezuela alone, 5 million migrants now have swelled out of their borders. We need the big ideas. We need the sustained engagement of all of nations and the whole of government of the United States, and the Department of Defense plays a role, particularly in that professionalism and institutional capacity building, so their security forces do the right thing and contribute to overall sustainable security.
You mentioned in your testimony the Russian and Chinese disinformation campaigns in these countries. Are they also encouraging migration as a way to undermine the U.S.? Do they see this as a weapon, just as they did with the Syrian migration into Europe several years ago?
The disinformation by Russia seeks to discredit every act of goodness, and we do many that the United States provides in the hemisphere. And to the extent that drives migration, there's no doubt. China seeks their own influence, their own economic dominance, and they seek clients while we seek friends and partners. I think their information campaign best exhibited by a recent visit to a country where I was asked about the illegal and unregulated, unreported fishing in the region, and I cited the example of Chinese involvement off of Ecuador, where their fleets would, for great periods of time, go silent and sweep into the ecological preserve. And then within minutes after my facts-based statement, which is based on the various credible sources, the Chinese proceeded to attack me and the media. That's just typical of their disinformation globally, Senator.
Well, I'm out of time, but I think your testimony that you, A, don't have adequate ISR resources, and B, there are not enough ships to interdict the drugs that are coming and killing Americans, including more than one a day in my home state, is very powerful. And that's a matter, that's within our control. That's a matter of allocation of resources. And I hope this committee can bring some pressure on the administration to allocate adequate resources for ISR and for interdiction, because we're not even interdicting the drug shipments we know about, let alone finding ones that additional ISR could provide. So that's something that I hope this committee can work on. Gentlemen, thank you both for your testimony. It's been very illuminating today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Let me recognize Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today and for your service to our great nation and the men and women within your commands. We truly appreciate everything they do for us every day. Admiral Fowler, we had a great conversation last week, and you really stressed to me the importance of our neighborhood. And I want to continue visiting about that today because we do need to be very aware, and I think this committee is, but that we have a lot of nefarious influencers within our own neighborhood. And I would like to talk a little bit about those transnational criminal organizations, as well as those that may be influencing those TCOs and where that's coming from. So you've provided the placemats for us today. China, Iran, Russia, they're all influencers in our neighborhood. And they're all operating. We see the TCOs as well. They are operating to our south, and they're bringing in about $90 billion of revenue annually. That is very concerning to me. And then the increase of movement across our borders is something troubling that we've all been talking about today. And we have to make sure that we're defending that border and pushing back against these influencers. So let's talk a little bit about the TCOs and what they are doing in the Southcom AOR, and are they working alongside China, Russia, and Iran?
The transnational criminal organizations are just murderous, violent organizations. They're murdering people, driving migration, and they're fueled on corruption. And so when I look at the interconnection of these organizations and the China-Russia players in our hemisphere, I look at corruption as a common element. It fuels both. Then we look at lack of regard for human rights, and there's a commonality there. And then we look at lack of regard for rules-based international order or rules in general, and there's a commonality there. So there is an interconnection. The money laundering connection is the most significant, where Chinese money laundering underwrites TCOs a significant portion, and that's something that we're tracking as part of all of interagency effort here in the United States. And so this corrosive influence undermines our democracies and contributes to the fragility and the security concerns we have right in proximity to the United States. Location, location, location drives everything, and that location is so important in this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. So as Senator Shaheen was asking about Chinese influence, so there's above the board operations going on with China where they're maybe engaging in legal activities, but then you're saying they engage in these criminal activities as well and under the radar type of criminal organizations.
So the National Defense Strategy and our Secretary's guidance cites China as the pacing challenge, and I side with what the Indo-PACOM commander said. It's the most significant threat we face in the 21st century. And we look at, we want this competition to work out peacefully and not end in conflict and not be adversarial. But Chinese, in addition to the illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, is involved in illegal mining, illegal logging. They are at least tacitly supporting the money laundering. They are using COVID and vaccines as a hammer to further the Chinese Communist Party interests, particularly to get better deals for Huawei and 5G, and to try to drive a wedge between the remaining countries that support Taiwan, and the majority of those are here in this hemisphere. So yes, Senator, there are corrosive, insidious influences being felt right here in our neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral, and I appreciate our discussion to that effect last week. And General VanHerck, in the remaining time that I have, we've had a number of our own troops working the southern border, which I think has been extremely important. They've been supporting United States Customs and Border Patrol. Are they still playing a vital role in the defense of our nation at our southern border?
Senator, probably best answered by CBP and DHS. My recent visit would tell you that we are playing a role to enable them to do their law enforcement role by providing support. When I look at the challenges that transnational criminal organizations create on the border, The symptoms that we're seeing are the migration, the human trafficking, the counter-narcotics. From a homeland defense perspective, Mexico being in the United States NORTHCOM AOR, and two major transnational criminal organizations with the Sinaloa and New Jalisco, we have a national security imperative with regards to the instability that they create, the tragedies they create, and the opportunities they create for nefarious actors such as China or Russia right on our own southern border to have access and influence. And so it concerns me very much, Senator.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, very much, and I appreciate you safeguarding our neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Chair.